I apologize for us being a little bit late getting this together. So in just a second, we will have proposed language changes that we hope address all the issues that were raised by the board members. We didn't make every change that was suggested by every person because some of them overlapped or contradicted. So what we tried to do was put together what we think is the best proposal. I'm going to walk through them, and then as I make errors in what I tell you, the staff will correct me so that we get it right. So Janine, can you bring those up? So what staff is proposing is to take the language concerning new mitigation assessment methodologies that was up for discussion as part of the amendment and move it to a new whereas clause 32 and remove it from the amendment. We, after discussion, believe that that is the most appropriate place since it is a speculative future issue, and as such, this directs staff to consider this as new methodology comes available.
Can you do me a favor? I apologize because I'm the one who had to leave early, but can you start on each of these changes by also giving me a short summary of why you looked at these changes? I can guess, but my brain can't hop right into it. I know you asked for it, but I need a little bit of just
okay,
start for a
yes,
second on what the issue was, also for people listening over the web. For me, primarily, I'm not going to blame the people listening over the web, although normally, I do ask questions so people over the web will understand that I think I know the answer to. But
so I will endeavor to try and do that, though I may not get it right. This issue was brought forward in our comments. The staff was unsure if they should include it as a recommendation, so it was included in the draft amendment as up for consideration for the board to discuss. The discussion that the board had, staff interpreted to say they like the idea, but it may not be appropriate in the amendment and consider it for the resolution. We went and looked at the options. We're proposing it as an addition to the resolution for the reasons I stated. Okay. Now, there was also,
So, I'm sorry, Jonathan, in concert with this, I assume then that that additional language would be removed from the amendment. Okay. The optional language that was that was included in the draft amendments would then be removed.
yeah, so we would delete that section that starts on page 12 that says, note, this language is an optional addition. That would all be deleted to the end of the bracket. The second issue that we want to talk about is a concern that was raised by stakeholders. We can bring that up just a little bit. It is a new whereas clause that the issue addressed was, yes, today it may be the preferred to use wastewater to dilute brine, but as recycling moves forward, it may no longer be the case. We worked for most of the time that we were in there trying to figure out the best way to say that so that it recognizes what's happening today, because for impacts on marine life, it is the best technology of practice today. But as wastewater becomes less available and more useful as recycled water, we wanted to recognize that that in the resolution. So this is the proposed language for the resolution.
I have one question. In the first sentence, you refer to it as the preferred approach, and in the last sentence, no longer be the preferred technology. Does it make sense to select one word for both?
Yeah, I think, right, isn't it technology that we talked about in the amendment itself? So it probably should be.
If it wants to track, and this is my fault because this was some of the language I played with, the first sentence should be switched to say the preferred technology, because that will track what you see at the bottom of page 8 on the May 5th version.
And if we're really consistent, it should probably say the preferred brine discharge technology. So that's something we can fix if.
So if someone would, Phil, are you taking a note on that? Okay, so.
Yes, I like the preferred brine discharge technology suggestion. Okay.
The third issue that was raised is a concern that the direction to staff on an MOA between us and the other agencies wasn't strong enough. And so what we propose is to take out explore and put in propose and pursue, to make it clear that this is not you're not asking us to call around and see, hey, how do you think about it, but to actually try and make it happen. The reason that we didn't say State Board direct staff to execute a memorandum of understanding is that we may not be able to come to one with the other agencies that, and so pursue and propose and pursue, I think sends a message that this is really important and that we need to try and make it happen without putting us in a situation where we may not actually ever be able to do it.
Well, I know the intention is there.
Right.
And also, you're going to draft a document if you're going to propose something, or at least you're going to propose a proposal.
Right. We will take on the job of drafting and trying to get concurrence with the other agencies. We obviously do it with them jointly because it's a memorandum of understanding. And I should note that we already have a working team to work on that with us, headed by the Ocean Protection Council.
Right. Okay, and that's what I wanted to confirm, that the working team, which includes the Ocean Protection Council, and I assume it includes DWR, will help to.
I don't know if it includes DWR.
It does. I'm getting a nod.
Okay,
It does.
because I'm not on the working group, so I didn't know.
Okay, good. Well, that is a great group.
Should we add those entities to this resolved?
Not for, they may not want to or be able to do an MOA, but they should be part of the conversation,
Good.
and it sounds like they already are.
That's fine. Thank you.
So the next issue was a concern that the sites that are being evaluated for subsurface versus surface intakes could exclude sites that where subsurface intake is a potential option if they were chosen with the idea that you were just going to do a surface intake and you chose the sites. So what we proposed is adding additional language that would require that a reasonable range of nearby sites, including sites that would likely support subsurface intake. We can't guarantee that they would support it until they actually do the evaluation, but this expands that and makes it clear that just doing 3 sites, all of which are not feasible for subsurface, even though right next door there's a site that potentially would be feasible, isn't acceptable. And that's what we were trying to capture with this change, and it would be to the amendment itself in Chapter 3, Section M2B. And
This may
I
seem
believe that's
stupid,
it,
but
right?
what do all the little asterisks mean?
Anywhere where we have a term defined in the,
somewhere.
that's what the asterisk means, is that there's a definition in the policy itself for that. We just like them, they're little stars, they're happy.
They are, they make me happy, yeah.
I think that's it, right? So, based on what we heard from the council, where we feel that these changes would capture those issues that were raised, and we're not proposing any other ones.
Okay. Just one, you didn't touch on the, we talked about the lead agency role, the CEQA considerations, but stakeholders did request removal of some factors that the regional board would consider, such as presence of sensitive habitat, sensitive species, energy use for the entire facility. I think you responded to that as we were having the discussion, but I would benefit from hearing that one more time. You've refined the list considering the regional board's process for 13.142.5B, but in addition to that, does it make sense to narrow the list further, considering those aspects will be taken into account through any CEQA process?
So I believe that the request was to remove, I think I gave away my copy of the slide, but to remove sensitive habitats, presence of sensitive species, and energy use for the entire facility. And I think our view is that those actually are relevant factors for any given site to determine whether or not some form of subsurface intakes versus some form of surface intakes are appropriate or feasible. Because I think the analysis was that if there's a very good, valuable benthic community, you may not want to dig up a infiltration gallery and impact it.
Yeah, and there's a beneficial use nexus I would offer as another reason why we'd keep it in.
Yeah, so we were not proposing to further reduce the list of factors.
And for clarity, this is the technology section. It's not so much the site section, although it's all related. But help me out a little bit to articulate the energy use side of it. Why would the regional board consider the energy use for the entire facility?
So the easiest example is that if you put in a subsurface intake in the right media, you wouldn't need a treatment facility on the surface water intake for sediment and things like that, which reduces your energy. That not having that is a different energy budget, but you have an increase for the pumping and you have a decrease for the treatment. So you have to look at the whole side.
And that would influence the evaluation of intake and mortality of
Right.
marine life?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Well,
There is a
well,
next-
at least specifically, it would be a feasibility issue that's directly related to this comparative analysis between surface and subsurface.
Okay.
And for Felicia's benefit, why don't you mention about public trust and how you felt like public trust might be, is not might be, is an overriding consideration?
Well, the public trust, it exists whether we say it or not.
Right,
It's,
exactly.
You know, sort of like dentists exist whether you say it or not. I understand that there are, I don't know why I always use dentists. I don't have a thing about dentists, but I like dentists. There are a number of things that people raise that would give them more comfort, and they feel strongly about it both ways. I'm not one of those people that think that people cancel each other out, but I understand a whole host of things that people mention that would make them feel better about the fights to come over given facilities. But the public trust doctrine exists, whether it's a doctrine or a, what's the other word, Michael? Remember there was a whole issue, never mind. So it exists, so the fact that it's in the resolution language I think is a nice thing, but I don't think we need to say it in order to know that it's something we can use.
No, I think
It's
that's
the whole
absolutely
reason
right.
we're doing the proposal in the first place, which I did not realize is the first comprehensive one in the entire world, to quote the speaker, the entire world, not just the world, but the entire world.
While we're talking about public trust, I was going to suggest, we don't have a slide for it, but if the board does want to keep the proposed finding number 7 in the resolution that talks generally about public trust obligations, there's a word that we'll propose that you delete in the third line. It says, I don't know if we can,
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Resolution
yes,
number.
only if it's available. So this is the proposed new resolution number 7, and the third line reads, when considering whether to conditionally approve or not approve a desalination facility, we just realized that the word conditionally really doesn't belong there. This applies whether it's a conditional approval or not.
Well, didn't it, part of the language that folks were objecting to was where feasible. So I thought it should consider the public trust when considering whether to approve or not approve a desalination facility.
We could change that as well. I think the confusion is if there's a difference between actually providing protections on the one hand, which you only do to the extent that it's feasible, as opposed to you always consider the public trust. So it's a bit of a distinction.
see.
But if you'd like,
So
we
the word
could
feasible modifies the protections, okay,
precisely.
not public trust protection.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I have a question for you on that, given that we've heard from some of the speakers today, and it was their recommendation that they wanted, it to be stronger because, in their opinion, it's stronger if it's in the amendments. So, and this is just a question, did staff consider including this language in the resolve section instead of the findings? Because the resolve actually directs that the Regional Water Board will consider public trust in making these decisions.
And I think that gets into the issue that Ms. Marcus was saying. I mean, the doctrine handed down from Justinian is our responsibility and the regional board's responsibility to consider and then protect where feasible. And so putting it into the resolved clause doesn't make it any more affirmative. It's an acknowledgement of something that exists outside of the water code.
And I will offer for those who...
Well, I think the concern was that the regional boards ignore our resolutions, especially the findings. So I will take it as a commitment from Mr. Bishop that he will make sure the regional water boards read our resolution, including the findings.
I will read them to them.
Thank you.
I think we have a role too as liaisons to those regions.
Yeah, well, as liaisons, I think that is true. You do.
Were you done with that? Because I actually had a question on something else. If you could scroll down to your last. Okay. On this one, staff had included in a previous change order the requirement for the regional water boards to consider different design capacities when it determines that subsurface intake is not feasible for a particular site, is it also staff's intention that when evaluating alternative sites, that alternative capacity should also be considered?
Isn't that handled somewhere else?
So
Yeah,
I think I know
That
what
was
you're.
one of the
this is-
recommendations that, yeah.
So this has been an issue all the way through. Do you include everything in each of the sections, or do you include it where it's most appropriate, we think? And so that's why we put it under a different section. I could make an argument for almost any of the factors we looked at in any of the design, siting, and technology that they could be part of the other sections. And so we chose where we thought it was the most appropriate to put it, and that's debatable too. That's why we put this into site, we put into the technology the idea that, well, if you determine it's infeasible for the design capacity, then you look at different capacities to see. And so that's why we did it. I can't argue that it's a perfect location, but what we don't want is a set of repeated analysis that are set up multiple matrix analysis that are not useful. We're doing it because we require it, not because they need to look at it. If that makes sense.
There might be something else I can add that might help. The language that we're proposing here in this section, we were conscious to not say including sites where subsurface intakes are feasible. Because frankly, we want a reasonable range of sites to be considered, and they won't know whether, and also not only whether it's actually feasible to do subsurface, but they also won't know at that point when they're selecting sites to evaluate what intake capacity precisely would be feasible for that site. So this is a more of a general obligation to kind of look generally and say, yeah, we think this area probably would support subsurface without jumping ahead and doing the full analysis before they even select the sites to evaluate.
And if there aren't any other questions, there was wasn't there one other issue that we needed to bring up? I'm sorry now.
Yeah, so we did want to talk a little bit more about the greenhouse gas issue. Claire was looking through sort of the information that we've obtained on potential off-gassing from slant wells. I'm going to ask her to describe that briefly, but I also just wanted to kind of reiterate this notion that, first of all, if in fact it turns out that off-gassing from subsurface intakes is a real issue, then our view is it's certainly something that would be considered case by case, facility by facility, and is allowed to be considered under the general language for the factors under technology, intake technology that we've been talking about. There's the catch-all at the end. And so it's not that, if it does turn out for any given site to actually be something that's meaningful, then absolutely we would expect the regional board to take that into account. But in terms of the information that we have about whether off-gassing is a real issue or not, I think Claire has a little bit more information to provide on that point.
So we've had a couple of stakeholders who have done test slant wells or test subsurface intakes. So the Cal American Water has theirs in Monterey, and there's Richard Bell with the Municipal Water District of Orange County. So both of these, both provided public comment during I don't remember if it was the workshop or our hearing or both, but both spoke to the issue of greenhouse gases from their subsurface, coming out in their subsurface intakes. And then I just received another email from Richard Bell today. He said he was watching, and he says that in their testing, they have no dissolved gases in the pumped water, so there was no off-gassing. And he also added that the aquifer provided outstanding filtration, which allows us to avoid pretreatment. And pretreatment requires energy to pump water through filters, slightly higher than the energy required to pump the ocean water from the wells, and then he provides the actual numbers. A very small amount compared to the overall energy requirement of the desal plant. So he says it's about 7%. And so these were sort of echoed by the folks from CalAm, who also said that they have also not seen this off-gassing to be an issue in the samples that they've taken thus far.
And then the last thing that we're going to recommend is that if there is a motion, that motion include direction to staff to make only those conforming changes to the response to comments that would be necessary to reflect the changes that the board is now considering.
Prior to that, we did talk a little bit about the APF issue and the statistical method that's recommended, and fairly emphatic language, and you decided not to add any clarification there. You feel comfortable that there's enough flexibility moving forward so that revised scientific input into the question can be brought into decision making?
I think so. If there's enough interest from, if this report comes out and there's a real push to get this language amended to revise something else, I think there's the flexibility to do so. The concern we had with pulling it out now is that we don't have anything on the record to show that, this would be an appropriate approach at this time. So we didn't have the report that said this method, if you do this, you don't need that. We just had an executive summary and a comment letter. So we didn't feel that was sufficient evidence when we had so much push to, really make this as high as possible. In some cases requested a 99% confidence interval.
And then also the floor for the mitigation ratio. I was satisfied with staff's response on that issue, because it's the bare minimum. It isn't setting the standard for mitigation in that scenario. So you've proposed to go ahead and keep the floor on the out of kind mitigation recommendation. 1 to 10.
We didn't have any other proposal other than just it should be completely to the opposite. So it should be 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. There was no proposal on the other end of some sort of backstop or limit. So we just used what was done in the past, which stakeholders had said, we have had this approved by other agencies and this was the method that they took. So we felt that that was appropriate for us to also use, that had actually been applied for a seawater desalination facility that had a 13142.5B determination. And so since it was what we had, we said, here's your backstop, but it's not set in stone because we didn't feel there was sufficient, evidence to go that far with it, but then provide the regional boards with the flexibility to use their discretion.
That's an excellent answer. Thanks. Just having the precedent to rely on, that's helpful. Thank you.
With that, unless there's any more discussion, I will move for adoption of this item with the 2 change sheets, with this additional changes made today, with the changes read by Mr. Wiles to finding number 7 in the resolution, to remove the word conditionally, as well as I think the words where feasible, as suggested by
There's
the
another
chair.
word. I'm okay with doing it either format once you explain what that meant. I think it's a little clearer because that, at first blush, it seemed that way to me. But considering the public trust works for me too, unless you think there's a benefit to saying it the way you said it.
It's totally up to the board. Either way would work. We would just need to articulate exactly what the words are if you want to change it.
Do you have an opinion, Mr. Laffer?
My recommendation,
You're the lawyer.
because right now it's
You're the
designed that the protections have to be there, the where feasible language should stay. I think it's cleaner in terms of understanding, and so the one change would be to remove the conditionally
Right.
from 7.
So remove the conditionally and directing staff to make the appropriate according changes to the response to comment, Did I leave out anything, Mr. Wells?
I think not, but if I could ask Janine to scroll to the top of the document that's on the screen, just to be clear on the changes to new whereas number
33.
33, sorry, one down. So that would now read, starting at the end of the first line, instead of
Oh, yes.
a preferred approach for dealing with brine discharges, it would read the preferred brine discharge technology. And then the last thing I'll say is, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, you mentioned all of the changes. The starting document is the version that was circulated to the public on March 20th. And so that includes not just the desalination amendment that we've all been focusing on here, the May 5th version, but it includes a number of other changes to the ocean plan, most of which are just conforming changes. Also includes the change for the table 2 that Ms. Chen talked about. So most of it is right here, what we've all been focused on, but I just want to make sure that the record's clear that it's really the entire March 20th package.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion or comments before we vote?
Again, I thank you to staff as well as all the stakeholders who've participated in this multi-year important effort.
Yeah, I want to add my thanks to the staff, but also to all of the folks who've engaged. I recognize that in any decision we make, there are people's hopes, fears. They're thinking about the battles to come, but I think we've struck a balance with setting these standards in a way that it creates a level playing field, the rules of the road, attempts to discharge our duty to protect important resources, and it's not set in stone forever. We've shown an ability as new information comes up or new conditions come up, we can act relatively quickly here, which even though this has been a 4-year process to do something large, we've also shown in other situations that we can act to fix things if we end up finding that there's another need to fix them. So I do think in many respects sometimes the perfect can be the enemy of the good, and I appreciate while I could noodle and edit to make various people feel comfortable, I think the intent is actually quite clear here, and we'll be watching and engaging, and I know we'll be hearing about everything that happens in the future. So with that, I'll...
Actually, before you call for the vote, let me just add one more thing. And looking at Victoria Whitney sitting there in the audience, I just have to bring up the fact that the entire Division of Water Quality has had a major workload the past few years, given that I think 3 of the board's highest priorities were located in not only that division, but that small little group. So kudos to you, Vicki, Jonathan, and your entire group for tackling some of the most challenging, complex priorities that the board set and accomplishing them in very, very fine fashion.
Yeah. Yes, thanks to staff and stakeholders. And this, I think desalination is a hard issue to talk about. I bet on this board.
Even a hard issue to say right. So far, everybody said it right today. That was really impressive.
Yeah, and the citation in the code. But I just want to acknowledge that it's difficult. There's a lot of site-specific issues at hand. There is the context of water supply reliability, but also a safety net for our coastal communities that we really need to take seriously. And so I think this policy does, at the same time, balance that very important issue of public health and safety with our precious marine environment in California, which I'll say again, it's a temperate marine ecosystem unparalleled on the earth in terms of its year-round productivity, thanks to the kelp forest and other amazing natural processes that we're so fortunate to have, and we're stewards of those processes, and that's why we were mindful of that, and that's why I'm proud of what we've been able to collectively achieve in reaching a good balance between those very important goals. So thank you for letting me say something about that.
With that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. Thank you all very, very much. Townsend, anything else?
Let's not.
I see no burning desire for board member reports, so with that, we stand adjourned until the next meeting. Thank you all very much.